Hi, Pro-Life Jen. It's Kristan Hawkins, and welcome to this new episode of How to Win This Week on Explicitly Pro-Life. Today, I want to talk about adoptions and the appalling attacks on adoption that have been coming ever since the Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization oral argument to the Supreme Court a couple of weeks ago. If you haven't listened to the oral arguments, I highly encourage you to listen to them. They are unbelievable. Justice Thomas, who doesn't usually talk that much, led right out of the gate with his questions, never really could get an answer to his questions. It was really amazing to watch the Solicitor General of Mississippi, Scott, forgetting his last name, argue the case for the Attorney General there, Lynn Finch, and then also to hear the lawyer for the Center for Reproductive Rights, who is representing the abortion vendor in Jackson, as well as the U.S. Solicitor General, who was trying to be her assist, on how they justified their extreme abortion stance. Basically, it came down to no backsies. Roe has been the law of the land since 1973. No backsies, can't go back. They're entertaining audio. More entertaining probably than my podcast, sorry, but maybe not. I don't know. Depends on what I'm saying. Okay, so during the oral arguments, though, Justice Amy Coney Barrett, love her, she made a very factual observation that the assertions of Roe and Casey that women can't succeed if they're burdened by the rigors and costs of being pregnant and child rearing, the very feminist pro-woman line that the abortion industry uses. She made the assertion that that's just false and discounted now because of the creation of safe haven laws where women can go and surrender their child after birth to a police station, a fire station, a hospital, other safe haven locations in her community. No questions asked at all. Just surrender her child, and because of adoption. And she is an adoptive mother, so of course this came up. And ever since that moment, and actually the next day, there have been arguments in the New York Times, Vogue, Vox, you name it, Ms., NPR, like any pro-abortion outlet out there attacking adoption. And it's really interesting because I think that the abortion industry and their friends in the mainstream media, they listened to oral arguments just as we did, realized that the abortion movement has no argument besides no backsies. And they realized they did a really piss poor job there of arguing for the court, and probably Roe versus Wade is going to fall and Doe versus Bolton with it. And so now we're attacking adoption. And it's really interesting that this is now suddenly like this leftist talking point that they hate adoption, because I know people who are Democrats and, liberal and don't agree with me on abortion, but love adoption because they themselves were adopted. Their parents placed them with an adoptive family, or they've adopted children. And so it's like this thing now, like the left hates adoption. And the articles all talk about, the pain that women, birth mothers, have to endure, the pregnancy pain, the pain of childbirth, the emotional pain of having to place your child into the arms of another couple that is going to love and rear your child. And it's very interesting that somehow that pain is not looked at as a heroic sacrifice of a mother saying, I love you, I want the best for you. I can't give you all that you need, but I'm going to find somebody who would. And instead of lifting up birth mothers and those who've made that courageous choice, now we're just saying the suffering that you're going to have to endure, this emotional suffering that you may endure as a birth mother, or the suffering that your child may endure in the future, which we don't know, and no one can predict. Once he or she finds out that she was adopted into a family, that suffering discounts the entire notion of adoption at all. That because there could be potential suffering, therefore we should get rid of adoption. It's actually quite unbelievable. But not completely unbelievable, because literally that's what the abortion lobby argues for all the time. We hear this on college campuses of, well, what about this circumstance? What about a child who's been diagnosed with cystic fibrosis or Down syndrome in the womb, or name another disease, insert here? Wouldn't it be better? Would it be more loving if the parents would just choose abortion rather than to give life to a human that's going to have this suffered existence? That's literally their argument, that we should just take this extreme step and get rid of the person who may potentially suffer rather than trying to eliminate or erase the suffering that someone may face. It's, like I said, it should be unbelievable, but it's not, because this is what the abortion industry argues time and time again. And those who advocate for abortion argue. I just find it shocking that now we're like attacking the entire institution of adoption. I don't think anyone believes that, when Roe versus Wade is reversed, every single woman who experiences unplanned pregnancy is going to want to or should feel like she must place her child in an adoptive family. That's not what anyone in the pro-life movement believes. We believe mothers should be able to have that choice, whether or not they want to parent their child or place their child with an adoptive family. And that's a choice she has to make. And both choices will be difficult and will require potential suffering, on her part. But I think we have to back it up here and realize that every human being, regardless of whether or not they face an unplanned pregnancy, regardless of whether or not they were adopted, will suffer in their life. Like, that's something that we as human beings accept as part of our human condition, that life is not like going to Disney World every day. I guess for my kids, that would be a day of non-suffering. For parents, that would be suffering. That's a bad example for adults. But life is not always easy. It's hard, and we all know to expect it to be hard. And I think this is a really slippery slope that the abortion argument now is making, that because anyone may suffer, we should just, eliminate that person. That is literally, to sum up all of these articles that I'm looking at right now, is, we should just not, support, we shouldn't promote adoption, because some will suffer. It's much, much better to tell her to go to an abortion facility and hand $300 to $500 to Planned Parenthood and abortionists, and yet all the suffering will be over. No, that's actually not true. We know women suffer greatly after abortions, and we certainly know children suffer. Many of them at 12 and a half weeks on can feel pain during an abortion. So I think for how to win, and what we need to be thinking about as our kind of like next steps in the pro-life movement, as we're preparing for a reversal of Roe this June in the Dobbs case, we need to do a better job of talking about adoption, being real, that adoption is never an easy solution, just like how parenthood isn't an easy solution. Being a parent is definitely not without suffering, even with planned pregnancies, right? But we need to talk about adoption, why adoption matters, why it's a beautiful thing. We need to be talking about women who've chosen this great sacrifice. Something I couldn't even imagine having to make that choice for my child, to place my child, one of my children, with an adoptive family. We need to lift those women up as the heroes that they are in our culture. We need to call it to account this terror, these terrible talking points that the abortion industry and their friends in the mainstream media are now using, and call them out for this. Let's counter them with our stories. I know many in the pro-life movement have adopted children. Many in our pro-life generation have been adopted into families. Let's tell our stories, and let's be real about our stories. And we don't have to edit out details that are hard or painful, but let's be real by saying, we're glad every single one of us is here. And the amount of potential suffering that a person may experience in their life does not discount who they fundamentally are, humans, and their value. because we know every human being has innate value and is worthy of life. And your amount of suffering that you may face in your life does not lessen your value in some sort of like bar graph chart of who has more value in life. So make sure you're talking about adoption and get the word out there that adoption saves lives. Adoption matters, and those who choose adoption are heroic.